Hey folks, I'm Chris Brenton, and in this video, I want to talk about creating safe lists within AC Hunter. This discussion will apply to both the Community Edition as well as the Enterprise Edition. I just happen to be running the Community Edition right now. The only difference between the two is the Community Edition, you can have a maximum of 50 safe lists, and that's it. 50 safe list entries, and that's it. So I need to kind of think through when I go through and create them. The Enterprise version, it's unlimited. You can create as many safe list entries as you want. Let's start with defining what is a safe list entry. A safe list entry is a situation where, yes, there's a persistent connection, but there's a business need behind it. So let me give you an example. So in this particular trace here, I have an internal system talking to cdn.onenote.net. Well, it's pretty obvious to figure out what that is, right? That's OneNote. That's part of my Microsoft tools. Is this legitimate? Well, I can actually look at what was the subject information that was on the digital certificate used by that server. And I can verify, does that match the fully qualified domain name that the user was going to, which in this case it does. The CN was cdn.onenote.net, same as the fully qualified domain name. And most importantly, the digital certificate is valid. If you see no, that means it's a valid digital certificate. If we know we use OneNote internally, this is talking to the OneNote CDN environment. It's doing it using a valid digital certificate. There's a business need behind it. It's okay to go in and create a safe list entry for this. What a safe list entry does is it makes sure that this specific pattern doesn't show up in future hunts. The data will still get collected. It's still there. If I remove the safe list entry, this data will come back. But for the purposes of scoring systems or what you visually see through AC Hunter, it's just going to be pushed off to the sideline. So let's say this is something we say, yep, there's a business need. I don't want to have this show up in my hunts anymore. Next to each of my fully qualified domain names and IP addresses, I'm going to see a little filter icon that shows up. So I'm going to go in and click on that. This is going to allow me to go in and create and tell AC Hunter, when you see this type of thing, don't worry about it. So I'm going to say I'm going to safe list this for all internal systems. I could just do this one IP address if I wanted to, but I'm assuming all my internal, any of my internal users may be using OneNote. So let's have that apply to all of them. I can say I want to do it based on cdn.onenote.net. Wildcard match is good when I want to actually safe list a subdomain, right? Let's say I was actually going to server1.cdn.onenote.net, and I know there's a server 2, server 3, server 4, server 5, server 6, and so on out there. Well, I don't want to have to create 6 different safe list entries. So I could go in and just do a wildcard match to say, yeah, anything that has, this entry to it, it's okay to go through and safe list it. So I could go in and say anything within cdn.onenote.net, that's okay to go in and create a safe list entry for. So I'm going to leave it specific to that. And then I could go in and I could create a comment for this. So for example, I could go in and say, OneNote usage. And I could say who it was who created it. And I could even, if I wanted to get fancy, go in and say, this was created on the 30th day of March, 2023. Just so there's some traceability here. If someone's going through safe list later, and says, why does this safe list entry exist? There's some mapping here to kind of help them out. Oh, OneNote. Oh, this is for OneNote. Okay, this is who created it. This is when it happened. Just leaves a little bit of an audit trail. As soon as I apply it, watch the screen in the background. You'll notice that the screen updates and changes, and that entry goes away. It moves on to Skype.com. And I could decide I want to go in and say, yep, anything to edge.skype.com, I want to create a safe list entry for that. If I need to manage that entry later, let's say I decide, creating that was a bad idea, I want to delete it, I can go in to view my safe list entries through settings. And I could go to this entry and I could change it, or I could go in and as you can see there, I just clicked the X and it deleted it. So that's how I go in and manage that. Now, I created that entry based on fully qualified domain name, or actually, technically it was based on the SNI information within the digital certificate. So it's a nice secure way to go through and do it. But sometimes you may need to do these based on IP address. So for example, here I've got an internal system that is talking to a DNS server, or excuse me, an NTP server, Network Time Protocol server. And a lot of times NTP entries are put in to the config file based on IP versus fully qualified domain name. So you may not see a DNS query go out to be able to safe list the DNS query, in which case you've got to do it based on IP. Well, this works basically the same way. I go to the little filter icon. I say, yep, I want to safe list anything going to this specific IP address. If I wanted to, I could say, the class C, B, or A behind it. You could do it based on ASN. I'd be really careful with that. When you say, I'm going to safe list this ASN, you're potentially saying, I trust all of these hundreds of thousands of systems. And that's not a very good posture to have. But the option's there if you want to use it. You could do it based on organization name, whatever organization is responsible for that MSN. I got a couple of different possibilities you can use. But we're just going to do it based on this IP. I could write a comment for it, as you saw me do before. I could also say, I only want to do it for this pair. This is great for remote access software. TeamViewer is probably a good example. With TeamViewer, there are certain systems internally. I'm okay if TeamViewer is running on it because they're managed by the IT group. But if TeamViewer shows up someplace else, I want to know about that, right? TeamViewer everywhere isn't necessarily a good thing. So if I need to restrict the source IP address, I can do it to specific IPs, to subnets. In this particular case here, I'm just going to create an entry based on the destination IP address only, and I'll let this apply to all my internal systems, meaning every internal system talking to this destination IP, it's okay. Once I go in and hit the safe list, you'll see the screen in the background updates again. It moves on to the next entry after that. So that's creating safe lists in a nutshell. Every module, it's going to work pretty much the same way. Hope you found this information useful.